Hello and welcome to this video. Today we're going to be taking a look at this helmet, which is the Norwegian M58 helmet or M1 US M1 helmet copy. Talking a little bit about the history and how it was used and so on. I brought out my Norwegian M51 field jacket to have an appropriate attire, and let's just go right into it. The history of the M1 helmet's service in Norway starts in the early 1950s, when the Norwegian military was standardizing on US field equipment, weapons, uniforms. Of course, the uniform I'm wearing right now, which is the M51, which is a copy of the US M43 uniform. I do have a separate video on this if you want to see that, but that's besides the point. In the 1950s, the helmet situation in Norway was quite bewildering. There were tons and tons and tons of left behind German helmets, both from helmets going back to World War I. So M16s, M17s, M35, M40s, and so on. Because of course there were several hundreds of thousands of German troops at the end of the Second World War in Norway, and most of those, of course, had a helmet. So Norway had quite a lot of German helmets that would have been repainted and so on, but that's besides the point of this video. And of course there were English helmets from Mark 1, Mark 2 helmets. There were of course pre-war Norwegian and Swedish helmets, but those are all kind of besides the point. And when Norway decided to standardize on US equipment, that of course applied to helmets as well. Now it's sometimes a bit difficult to find concrete information about equipment used in this time period. So I am fairly sure that actual US M1 helmets were being used in Norway at this time, but those would have disappeared as soon as these got into service, because of course most of the US equipment that Norway got would have been through the Marshall Plan. So most of the equipment would have been sent back once there was no use for it in Norway, or Norway could get a source of equipment. Basically, the Norwegian M58 helmet is almost an exact copy of the World War II US M1 helmet. If we take a look at the chin strap that I fastened right here, you can see it's a bit difficult to get off, but I think that is kind of the point with this. It's the kind of standard ball clamp, or basically the exact same as the World War II variant. And of course the liner chin strap, which works to hold the liner helmet and the outer shell together, is also pretty much the exact same. But of course this is made from a webbing material, not leather, as was the case with the actual US helmets. If we take it off and take a look at the liner, we can see it's basically identical. Of course the liner helmet is not made of a kind of resin fiber material, but made of plastic. That's pretty much it as far as features on this helmet goes. It's there's not really a lot to talk about. It's basically an M1 helmet, but of course the liner is adjustable for pretty much all sizes. So it's very versatile and practical from that standpoint. And but the interesting history, the interesting thing about this is that no M1 helmets were produced in Norway. The shells were all Austrian produced shells. Now, of course, the Austrian M1 helmets didn't have this type of buckle, chin strap buckle. So I'm a little bit unsure if these were installed in Austria, or if Austria just delivered the bare shells to Norway. I'm not entirely sure about that, but anyways, the buckle is of course different, and the inner liner helmet is made in Denmark, which is very interesting. You're sourcing these two from two different countries, and then they are compatible. It's very cool to me, of course. Made, I'm sure, with US help setting up the factories and so on. So there's no reason they wouldn't be compatible. They're not very high tolerance parts, so I have heard some sources say that some shells came from Germany, and that some inner liners were made or assembled in Norway, and I think the assembled part is a bit more likely. I don't think any liners were made in Norway, and I don't think any German shells made it to Norway. As far as I know, if any one of you have any information, then please correct me down in the comments. And talking a little bit about the history and use of these basically served well up into the 2000s, and I believe they are still in use with some units now, not as a piece of active piece of kit that you actually get issued, but more as a thing that you may get if you, for example, if you apply for some of the special forces units. I believe they still give these to the candidates. I think they still give this to candidates. There's a documentary film from about a little over 10 years ago where they still used these because if they get damaged, it doesn't really matter. It's not an expensive Kevlar helmet that will be destroyed if you drop it too hard. But in main active service, these would have been phased out by the mid 2000s in most units, in all branches. I'm sure some continue to be used in the Home Guard a little bit later, but the Home Guard is kind of an outlier when it comes to Norwegian stuff. And the common kind of from about the 70s and onwards, these were pretty common to be worn with scrim in it, but not going through the helmet net, but kind of underneath the helmet net to help bring a bit more camouflage to it, and also to stop the kind of the shininess of. It's not really shiny, but at a distance you may spot the helmet just for being a bit more glossy than the nature of foliage around it. So these would go underneath the net, as I said, and then you would use the net to attach foliage to it. So small branches, grass, so on, to kind of break up the figure of your helmet and head. And speaking of helmet nets, this is perhaps the most common type that you'll see, and the other type that is less common to see is has more of a brown kind of khaki color to it, and has much bigger loops in it. And if I just quickly take the helmets off to show you, the net is held in place with this elastic band, so it's held pretty well in place, in my opinion. You do sometimes see them being worn with the field cap underneath, like this, which is of course not unique to Norway. It's pretty common in many countries to have being able to put the field cap underneath the helmet, but this doesn't seem to have been super common. So, but just as an anecdote, I suppose. So all in all, I like this helmet a lot. This is actually the first helmet I ever got. I'm not much of a helmet collector, but I gotta have one of these because they're still super cheap in Norway. So, and that's everything I have to say for the video. So, if you have any questions or comments or want to correct me, then by all means put it down in the not the description, but the comments. Put it down in the comments, and I'll be more than happy to answer anything. So, with that being said, goodbye.